Hey everyone, Killer Carlson here, and today I'm being joined by a very special guest. Can you please explain yourself and what you're working on?
Hey there, I'm DK, Diamond King. I work on a fan-made expansion mod to the AAA game Five Nights at Freddy's Security Breach, where I manage the project, I manage the people who work on it, the promotion, and most importantly, the environmental design for all the maps.
Well, I'm honestly new to the game development industry, but I'm targeting storytelling right now, so thank you for coming on board, and I thought I'd ask you a bunch of simple surface level questions about the Remains team's work and the obstacles they face as a game development studio.
Absolutely, I'm honored to be on, really.
Alright, so question one. What is the thought process when you and the team work on 3D models? How much of it is for simple structure, and how much of it tells an important story, and how do you know when to balance the two?
So, when it comes to working on Remains, obviously we make a lot of cut areas, and a notable thing about Steelable is they usually don't delete their models. So it's not often that we actually are able to 3D model something while we're trying to stick to the accuracy of the things that came before. But there are obviously some instances, one I could give right now, are the old play structures for the daycare. So obviously we take accuracy to the utmost highest, so we'll bring in visual images to compare the models to, and then obviously we'll test the models in game to make sure it appears correctly without any technical issues before we do full implements with thousands of models being placed, and we always want to, merge the models, decimate, make sure they have the lowest polygon count while also keeping their quality. And as I said earlier, since this is a cut content mod, there's not exactly much story elements that we are really allowed to put in while trying to keep our values. Of course, there are some, for instance, the boiler centerpieces. The boiler is a big part of a mission, so we make sure to take that valuable, so we make sure that it's kind of vibrant, but also kind of grungy to, fit with the boiler aesthetic. But we want to make sure it's vibrant so people can understand it and notice it, and we put it in a convenient place so that the player will know it is a point of interest.
Nice. I honestly think it's really impressive how you're building like 85% of everything from the ground up, which I think is really awesome, and I think you're just doing an amazing job, and you're really working your butts off. So huge shout out to the Remains team and to you, DK, and thank you for working this hard this past year and a half. You're doing really good.
Honestly, a pleasure.
Alright, question two. I noticed that the trailers have their own original score, and I was wondering if any time there is original music, how do you direct music when working on a project? Also, how does music influence media such as trailers and teasers when it comes to emotion and what you show and what you build up to?
So, a big part of promotional materials, mainly trailers, which is probably our biggest thing, our biggest recognition comes from our previous trailer that's been posted over a year ago now, and still gains thousands of views to this day, is the score. Within the mod itself, we don't have much opportunities to get OSTs, but I have been able to fit some in. For example, the racing minigame. You're obviously going to want some good music to go with that. You want some pumped up high beats. You don't want anything over the top or dark and mysterious. You want to have a joyous whimsy time. But whenever we're showing off a trailer, which mostly shows basement, dark, grungy areas, we want to have sort of an industrial vibe. And the actual old security breach trailers cover this perfectly. So for our first trailer, we had kind of an orchestral piece. We wanted this to kind of give a looming sense of despair. There's this whole orchestra playing. You kind of feel you're just one small pawn in a big game.
Yeah.
So that kind of conveys a feeling. And with our next trailer, which is coming out soon, we've gone for a more intense, action-packed thing because we are going to be showing a lot more action-packed, cutscenes, events, and the such.
Awesome.
So we always like to, number one, pay homage to the previous trailers. So the next one's going to be real inspired. And also, just make it sound good. I want to be able to put this trailer music on repeat because number one, I'm gonna be satisfied with the product. Number two, if the trailer soundtrack is good enough, people will put the whole trailer on loop, which generates more views, more attention, which makes YouTube push it out to more people. So it's kind of good. And obviously, with stuff like dialogue, you want to do audio dubbing. So you want to keep the trailer playing, but you want to put focus on the dialogue. So you lower the trailer soundtrack, so it's still playing in the background, but it focuses in on the dialogue without the viewer even having to force that.
Yeah, when I used to work on like iMovie trailers, I would have to put the music volume up 150% and the dialogue volume up 75%.
Yep.
All right. So number 3, since you're working with a huge team of I think like 16 people, which kudos. What is the perfect way to manage multiple ideas across several people? Do you have a huge list of notes that you organize in different areas like a Google Doc or a spreadsheet, or do you have individual digital meetings with team members focusing on one area at a time with those notes in hand? And similarly, how do you keep track of all the code? Do you keep track of it all by drawing it on paper in person and labeling it?
So, first off, the keeping track of everyone's opinions, it is quite a difficult thing, because when it comes to this stuff, there is kind of an objective way to do it. Like, it's not like an opinion sort of way, it's gonna be like, this is kind of how we're gonna have to face this issue, and there's no other really way around it. But whenever it's possible, for like stuff that's up to our interpretation, if we have a blank room and we don't know what to put in it, that's the perfect time to take the team's opinions and utilize them, make everyone feel as though their voice is heard. So I'm not always perfect at it myself, but I've learned to be better at it as a manager who's running this sort of big scale thing. So I try to keep track of everyone's stuff. I do have stuff like docs, I have spreadsheets, I have entire Discord channels, I have meetings with the staff team. So for instance, for the endings, I have the animators choose which specific shots they feel most comfortable doing, because whenever an animator is able to feel comfortable with that shot, they're allowed to express themselves even better, make the shot higher quality. Other stuff like accuracy, it's really hard to remember every single change, every little box that was removed or added. So I like to keep a doc with some of the other mappers where we occasionally update small findings because we're not always going to be able to remember it. Even as earlier as today, one of the programmers was looking at an unused map and he made some observations about how there was a vent and Gregory would have likely had to go through it, which I hadn't previously interpreted. So I was really glad to hear him out on that idea, and I actually will be meeting with him soon to discuss that idea further. And on the topics of meetings, I usually don't have many one-on-one meetings. I'll usually have it with like just programmers or just the animators or just the entire team. I do enjoy doing entire team things, like even if there's not a huge thing to discuss, I will call a full team meeting. We'll discuss everything, say our current plans, like, hey, we're yada yada, this percentage complete on the second trailer. This is what I kind of want us to focus our direction on. And I always like to, treat the team to like a fun time, because once again, this is a volunteer project. So I make sure to host some little team building game nights. Just last Saturday, the team gathered together for about a 30-minute meeting, discussed future promotion, like marketing, banners, and etc. And after that was done, we all grouped together for a team-building exercise on Lethal Company, where we all played together and had a great time. It even got some inactive members to join back and kind of get them back in the spirit or motivation to continue working on the project.
Nice.
So for keeping track of code, there is primarily about 3 active coders. And what we have on Remains is a server system, number 1, for protection in case someone decides to leak anything, they don't have access to every file. And also so I could coordinate meetings easier, just have kind of directed chats. So we have a central hub server where all team members get to VC together for team meetings, or where they get to exchange files. So like if a modeler needs textures, they'll get the textures from there. But for instance, like if there's code done, they'll put it into a file sharing channel in the coder's server. So it's only accessible to the other 3 coders, and it is in that exact channel, and it'll have correct labeling and stuff. And obviously we use GitHub, but for the smaller stuff like small game mechanics, we'll probably add it to a thread to make sure it's, a little more organized, we could keep track. But we find this the most efficient way since all coders can access it, instead of like if we had a paper, then we'd have to take pictures and give it to each other, and it'd be difficult to update. Meanwhile, we can update this in real time and edit any changes and upload files to the same location.
Sweet. Alright. Question 4. What goes in your mind when you're programming something? When you're programming something like an animation or a cutscene or a totally different kind of sequence, maybe something like the Giant Office minigame at the 2 a.m. section. Is it a bunch of ifs and thens string together, or is it like a road path and the sequences are like forks in the road?
So I personally am not the best to answer this since I'm not exactly a coder, but I have always been present with the coders. So I can kind of answer this question from what I've observed myself. Obviously, since we're trying to stay accurate to the style, we don't often add animations, but I will always try to press for animations, but if the team members disagree, I will always respect that. But for instance, the Frozen Endo mission, I had an idea where you would have to press E on the endo, you try to grab the Faz cam, but since it's frozen, Gregory would fall over, and that would emphasize the point they need to melt the endo to grab the camera. So obviously, it depends on the type of animation with what blueprint we're gonna use. So if you checked out the Halloween teaser, that was actually separated into 3 different animations with Moon on the pipe. There was an in animation, which was Moon getting onto the pipe, jumping down from the ceiling. There was a idle animation that could loop, and there was an out animation for whenever Gregory would flash Moon with his flashlight. So we used Blueprint for about 90% of our coding. We will often use a road path, but for cutscenes, we will use these things called level sequences, which forces the camera into an exact position so we can force the player to look at something that we want to bring attention to. So say Gregory needs to look at Monty falling. We will throw the camera into a level sequencer, which will smoothly force the player to look towards the blueprint that we tell it to. So we'll do that, and then at the end of the sequence, we will return the player view and teleport them to the correct location. So it appears as a sort of, flawless in-game movie, but it is actually animations with kind of a forced camera perspective and some character location manipulation to make it seamlessly fit.
Honestly, that's mind-blowing to me. That's kind of a personal question, and thank you for answering that. I think that's really educational.
Of course.
Alright, so question 5. Since Security Breach, one of the biggest things that it lacked was optimization, and you're working on making a mod that is trying to be more optimized, right?
Absolutely.
Alright, so when you do that, how do you locate significant game-breaking bugs in a huge open space in your project? Do you hire professional speedrunners, which people have suggested before in the past about games, to run into every nook and cranny and try to break or phase through something? Do you aggressively spam every relevant mechanic in one place at a time, or does it all depend on the structure of the code?
So that is an excellent question, and to first off answer, yes, we actually do have professional speedrunners on the team. So we've actually hired most of Poppy Playtime's playtesters, some of which are consistent speedrunners like my dear friend Barney Goose. I personally speedran a lot of games with him in the past, so he knows how to abuse bugs and glitches and etc. We also have other people such as Tetrabit, who is familiar with games coding, so we can tell him how to do this. Yeah, so we have a pretty stacked playtesting team, but we mostly try to fix the issues before they reach the playtesting team. So for optimization, say I open the daycare map right now. You know how there are hundreds of little nets in there? You know? What we will do is merge most of the nets together so that whenever loading in the area, instead of loading 20 meshes, it'll load in 1 mesh. And then we also put it through decimate filter so that it will lower the polygon count when necessary. We also obviously have LODs set up which are low distance meshes. So whenever Gregory is farther away, it'll lower the polygon count of the nets because Gregory can't see that detail, so it's not needed. Therefore, it's saving performance. And obviously, just as a map designer myself, I can kind of notice some issues, like the castles have open roofs, so Gregory can just hop out of there. So I will always, place more invisible walls than necessary. I'd rather be safer than sorry. So it might break someone's heart that they can't jump up on top of the slide, but I'd much prefer that than them skipping the time segment and breaking the game.
Alright. Actually, 2021 had like 3 major dream games for me: Little Nightmares 2, Security Breach, and Resident Evil 8. And Resident Evil 8 Village actually had like you said, that low poly distance thing that I always liked. And I felt like Security Breach kind of did that, but it was more so just rendering objects in vision rather than just doing low poly when like a garage door or an elevator door is closed.
Well, it's a combination of those. Security Breach obviously has its maps segmented, and the maps will only load whenever you're close to a door or elevator. They also do have the low distance fields, but the issue is the models themselves are too high poly. For instance, if you go into the atrium and you look at the rocks on the little, islands, those things are about 2,000 polygons when all you need is a texture map. So automatically, we can get rid of about 8,000 polygons within that atrium just by giving it a better texture. For instance, like the padding on the floor in the daycare. Instead of using individual models which have 300 polygons, we could use a single plane with 4 polygons and give it a normal map to give the illusion of it having depth, but it not actually having depth and not being performance costy.
Awesome. Now, this is something that I think you're really gonna love or hate, but obviously working on a big mod to restore all cut content is no easy feat, and it's not made any better when you're discovering cut content like new cube maps, new files, new maps, new models. And one example of this, actually, back in last August, Scott, in an interview, the co-story writer for Security Breach, mentioned how a certain character, Burntrap, wasn't supposed to be like the final boss, just supposed to be a ghostly, mysterious apparition, but that obviously wasn't what happened. So with that being said, how is development affected when you discover something new or conceptualize a new idea, even though this information wasn't considered at the start of development? Does it slow things down, or does it positively influence your perception of what you've already produced?
So that is a pretty good question. From my start of modding, there's always been some sort of leftover, whether there's an old outline of a map or some old props left over. But as we work more towards these maps, we learn more Unreal Engine things. And using these Unreal Engine things exposes even more. So it's kind of like learning the Elder Scrolls or something like that, to kind of give it a euphemism. So, for instance, I will learn about navigation paths, how certain developers will put volumes over props so that, animatronics won't spawn on top of a wall, for example. So after learning about this, we realize, hey, that might be a thing. So what we do is we open up the AI pathing map, and lo and behold, there's several volumes for cut locations which have no leftovers, outlining props so that characters couldn't spawn on them. So whenever I line up the prop with the volume and they perfectly fit, like say there's a square volume and I put in a box in there and it fits perfectly, I know that I've got that down. Someone 3 years ago placed that exact model right there, so I know that I'm getting closer. Another one, the survival mode. They have a randomizer for all the prize boxes, including cut locations. So we learn how to extract those and plant them into one map. So now I have a map showing every single possibility of a prize box spawning, which gives me the exact dimensions of a prop. So it'll show me whether it's like sitting on the seat of a forklift. And just as recently, we learned about Q maps while experimenting with reflection spheres. So obviously, developers aren't always going to be rebaking Q maps every single time they make a build. So we thought that there'd be something to slip through the cracks. And eventually, yes, we found a bunch of old locations such as the boiler. So obviously, we value accuracy the most, so it has unfortunately led to a lot of maps being completely redone. For instance, we had a cut version of the boiler where it was just straight like concrete hallways with pipes covering the walls and the ceilings and vents everywhere. But after discovering the Q maps, we see that it was a big open area with catwalks, so we unfortunately had to cut that and redo it. So it has certainly added a couple of months onto the development, but it ultimately makes me prouder as it makes us more true to our goal. And these ideas, while some of them are bad, some of them are pretty valuable. I like how the boiler looks, and I'm kind of glad that it was that way. I mean, even originally, I kind of had that idea, but we wanted to err on the side of caution, so we just kept it as concrete hallways.
Yeah, I was just looking at the boiler earlier, and it has that old secure breach feel, even though it was cut. I really wish it was featured in a trailer, because it looks really cool.
Well, hey, that's what we aim to do with our trailers. We try to give that vibe back. We try to give that feeling back. That's why our next trailer is almost spot on with some of the security breach and the ruin trailers. I've specifically requested them to be that way.
Yeah, you really knocked it out of the park. Good job.
Thanks.
Alright, so this one's gonna be a little tougher, but when you're designing a trailer like the gameplay trailer, for example, and it reveals new features like environments and mechanics and new animations, how do you convey enough information to the viewer so that they understand what they're witnessing and can have enough information to make furies without spoiling too much, such as key plot points or major sequences of the project? And do you show small pieces of big things and big pieces of small things? For example, the huge loading dock office, or does it all depend on how relevant the information you're showing is?
So that is a pretty good question. I'll use this as a basis since we've since changed it. At the end of our previous trailer, we had Chica falling through a pipe and reaching up. Originally, the full animation was Chica reaching up and chasing you throughout the yellow maze as sort of a chase sequence with her cutting you off through tunnels and such. So that was a smaller piece of something big. It also gave people enough room to theorize. They wonder, why did Chica fall through the pipe? Is this Chica? Is this somebody else? What's going on here? So, number one, it's just a generally cool, hype scene. And secondly, it shows just enough to get people interested, but not enough to reveal the actual what's going on here. Another aspect is showing big parts of small things. So sometimes we will emphasize a location. For instance, we've shown off the daycare a lot in the previous trailer. Despite the fact that you don't stand much there, it's whenever you take in every single detail into account. As an environmental artist, I get to place all these details. I get to place little Easter eggs. I get to put each little decal right here to indicate something that happened. And obviously, I don't want that to be shoved in the viewer's face, but I want that to be recognized. So, sometimes we'll show it off more than it's welcomed. Sometimes people will be open to it, and sometimes they will not. So we'll take that feedback and listen to it.
Alright, what role does lighting and shading play in both the teaser and the final product? Does it just set the mood for the environments you explore, give the locations more visual depth? For example, the revamped lighting for the disassemble Freddy scene where he's about to die, or does it conceal secret objects like props and characters out of sight to make sure that the audience constantly has more to discover?
Okay. I like that one. So, as an environmental artist, I do quite a bit of animation, but we do have people that are specifically kind of in line to do lighting. We have lighting artists and professionals. So, obviously, we do use lighting to, make indications. So for the daycare, we'll put spotlights over the generators, subtle spotlights, not to immediately draw the player there, but so if the player walked past, they know that that's kind of an objective point that they've got to, do or interact with. And another thing is hiding stuff, like you said. Me personally, as a map designer, I know it's not usual, but I will always add extra hidden details that nobody will see. I'll add like a crack in the wall with a huge room behind it. Nobody else would usually look at it, but I just kind of do. I just kind of put that effort into there, and I don't particularly know why. I think it's just kind of my passion for it. I just like doing that. I like the world building, even if it's not that important. But another thing is characters. Going back to our Halloween teaser, we have Moon shrouded in darkness. And another thing with the burn trap thing that you were talking about, we often use lighting to convey him. We'll usually use rim lights to kind of give that looming presence. It'll, number one, cast a silhouette, and number two, kind of make the area in front of him dark. So you can't see much. All you can see is a black silhouette of kind of a withered character with those glowing, penetrating purple eyes. So it kind of adds to the, spooky atmosphere. And also, if you look at it, you'll definitely DMC it. But if you look past it, you won't think twice. You'll just see two purple glowing dots. But if you really look closely, that's what'll get the, kind of creep factor in.
Yeah.
It's kind of a balance, and it works well.
That's really cool. All right. So onto the more environmental storytelling side, because obviously there's going to be people who want to explore old locations, look at a wrench and try to connect it to a character, which I may or may not have a history of doing. Okay, so how does art influence you when you're trying to bring texture to locations such as basements, arcades, and even objects within those locations? And when you have the correct textures and resources on hand, does it come naturally to you how some things should look, or do you research from online sources?
So, personally, I've actually got to experience this as recently as about 2 days ago. Actually, no, it was yesterday.
Oh.
So, yeah, I've recently learned how to texture myself. We do have a specialized texture artist on the team. But, I don't want to always bug them, and I also have some things that they don't know exactly how to do. So, we don't have many custom art pieces. Once again, we try to stay accurate. But there are certain locations that we know what mood we want to invoke. For instance, like a back hallway that's not accessible to, the normal people, just staff. It's going to be less well kept. They don't need to keep it up. It's going to just be visible to employees. So what I'll do is I scour for things like dirt decals and molding decals. So I can apply these over normal wall textures and almost make it seem like it's a new texture. But instead, it's just, kind of a mishmash without having to create more file space by making another texture. So for areas like basements, especially basements, we like to have stuff like leaks coming from the ceiling, or like puddles coming from little leaks from pipes, little dust on the floor, because, the mop bots aren't going to be mopping the floor in the basements. That already has like a bunch of gravel and dust and dirt. They're going to be mopping the upstairs where everyone sees the happy place. We'll also use contrast. So we'll put down a cute little poster and it'll be like, remember to smile, like, a little winking character, right? But we'll cover it in mold and cobwebs to kind of get the feeling that the player's not welcomed here. This is kind of a dangerous environment compared to the upstairs. The upstairs, you'll see all these flashing neon lights, moving signs, etc. When you go down, the only moving things are going to be spiders and foes in the shadows. So we kind of like to keep that contrast to keep in mind this is where the player is right now, and this is the circumstances that you're in. And just as recently as yesterday, I had to create textures because obviously, we need to restore stuff, and sometimes they cut stuff, sometimes they don't. For instance, the snack machine is a popular thing. The snack machine is a cut prop, which was just kind of used around the Pizzaplex. We have the model, but the entire texture for it is missing. So I've worked together with teams to, number one, search up what snack machines look like IRL, like vending machines. So obviously they have bits of like candy bars and chips inside. So we note that down. We also have some teasers of it, of it being in the background. So like the Roxy Raceway airlock, it has it on the left side. So we take a picture of that, but it's really low quality. So we kind of use that as a basis to go off of, and then we expand it from there. And obviously, we're polishing cut content, so we make any changes that we see fit, while also still trying to keep the vision. So we combine online resources, or just stuff made by professionals, along with, pre-existing stuff in the game. We obviously want it to match the art style. So if I'm gonna make a new poster for someplace, I'm gonna keep it all happy and smiley with cute mascot on the front.
Cute. I think that's just really cool.
Yep.
All right. So number 10, working with dialogue that you are trying to resurrect or recreate. How important is voice acting in a story? Does it just add more personality to an established character? Or does it do even heavier things like set the tone of certain situations, or maybe even hide clues to overarching plot points within the story?
So, Obviously, we don't often have the opportunity to do new dialogue, but of course there are new story elements that we've discovered and that we have to implement and add faithfully. And not everything is left over. Sure, there are some things left over. For instance, there's a cut voice line of Gregory being like, "Hey, did you see that dancing rabbit lady?" And Freddy's like, "No, I can't detect what you're talking about. We don't have a rabbit at the Pizzaplex anymore." So obviously, that gives overarching insight. Vanny is invisible to Freddy, so the main foe is not visible to the animatronics, which may be, a reason why they're evil. Vanny cannot be seen, and she might have control over these fellas. It also adds more personality to Gregory. It shows that he's kind of concerned about this, and it adds more personality to Freddy. He is confused, but he sympathizes with Gregory, and he also exposes kind of like a lore thing. So not only does it show the mystery about how Vanny is seemingly not being detected by the animatronics, it also talks about the disappearance of Glamrock Bonnie, which is kind of resolved and ruined.
Yeah, definitely.
So obviously, we also need to make custom stuff like that. So with new storylines, or new plot points rather, we get our voice actors, which sound amazing. We've made sure to stay as faithful as possible. We use it not only to, give even more character, we also give it to kind of emphasize story points. So like, you may see a broken staff bot right here. If Gregory comments on the condition of this staff bot, it might be emphasizing like, dang, that staff bot being broken seems to be important. I wonder what happened to it,
Mm-hmm.
So it kind of emphasizes that there's something going on that's causing this staff bot to be broken. So it's just kind of a mix of all of them, and we try to balance it as much as possible while also trying not to add too much dialogue as we're trying to remain faithful, but also create a polished product here.
Nice. Alright, so I think this is gonna be the best question, but artificial intelligence. When you're working on a video game project where enemies can wander around and looking for you in open spaces opposed to the original scripted pathfinding AI that the characters had in the game, what should your restrictions be when working with their artificial intelligence? How capable should wandering threats be without being too intelligent? And similarly, how often should certain enemies appear in specific locations in order to make the experience feel challenging yet balanced?
So that's actually a really important thing that we've found recently. So upon further inspection with the files, we found this unused AI system called the heat system. Essentially, every room or every section of a room had something that was called a POI value. And the longer that you stayed in that POI, more quote-unquote heat it would gain. And with the old animatronics, they would freely path. So the longer that you stayed in the area, the more hot it got. And the hotter it got, the closer the animatronics would circle. They wouldn't automatically go to that location, but if you stayed in there for long enough, they finished patrolling the other area, so your area is next. So if you've been in there for about 5 minutes, the heat percentage is about 50%. So they've cut off about half the map, and now they're searching the half of the map that you're on. If you've been in there for 10 minutes, the heat range is at 90. So now they're circling the location you're in and maybe like 3 rooms around it. If you've been in there for 15 minutes, that heat is at 100%. They have entered your area. They know where you are. They've finished patrolling everywhere else. They absolutely know that you're here. And another thing, not even pertaining to the animatronics, in survival mode, Vanessa and Vanny have a similar mechanic called the Vanny meter, where if you stay still longer, the Vanny meter will go up faster. So it'll switch from Vanessa, the friendly night guard, who you will die if you get captured by her, to the extreme and fast and cruel Vanny. So if you stay still long enough, the threat gets even difficult. So you need to always keep moving. You need to always be on your toes. It was even said in the October trailer, always keep moving. Try not to draw attention to yourself. It's kind of the main motif of the game. Keep moving or you will be spotted and you will be caught.
Ooh, nice, awesome. I'm in love with this game, but a game that I fell in love with a few years ago, Alien Isolation.
Yep.
It has that same feature. What I learned on YouTube recently is that the Alien has a director feature where this AI will tell the alien's AI the general area you are without telling you where. It has like a rough estimate of where you could be without telling you what table or bed you're hiding under. So I'm really excited for that. That's gonna be awesome. Good job. I think this is gonna be a good step up from the original Security Breach, and I think it's gonna make the remains like 5 times more impactful than it already was. So
Yeah, there's stuff like AI room heat decay, so if you exit the room, it won't immediately drop down to 0%. It'll start decrease, so you can kind of use that as a mechanic. What you do is stay in the room for 15 minutes so that the characters are at 100%, so they stay there. And then if you have a safe route to exit, or if you have a distraction, you get out of the room, but they continue patrolling there because the heat is still high and they have to wait for it to die down to exit that room. There's also POI increase per second. So if you grab a present or if you grab a security badge, you know, the ones that make the loud alarm, obviously that's a loud alarm. It's going to draw people near. So it's going to raise the heat value exponentially and make people patrol closer to you or even directly on top of you.
Yeah, that's really cool. Okay, so question 12. This is going to be a little bit like the opposite of 3D design. What impact does 2D art have on a project that is otherwise made nearly entirely in 3D? Is it just used for cool signs, maps, symbols, or does it give certain sections more context like decor for an arcade or directions for creepy basements? Or does 2D art do even more than just directions and cool symbols?
That is a very important thing that we tackle on Remains. So we've always valued having the basements be navigational. So each basement, each roundabout, each hallway, it has its own title. So it'll be like R&D GGB1. So you know that you're in basement 1 because of B1. You know that you're in the Gator Golf roundabout because it says GG, which stands for Gator Golf, in R&D, which stands for roundabout. Or Core GG8. So you're in the 8th corridor that leads to Gator Golf. And obviously, we have even more stuff to indicate that. So we'll have green stripes to indicate that you're in that area. So, you know, like a little green stripe, it kind of acts as like a coat of paint that goes over a wall. So it'll look all bumpy. It'll look immersive. It'll look like it belongs in the game. And even more, we have little icons. So we have the little security office icon to indicate that there's a security nearby. So that's obviously a big part. Another part is decor. You know, all of the animatronics have signs of them or ads of them.
Yeah.
And sometimes we'll update art. So for instance, Chica had her guitar changed throughout development. So we changed her guitar back in all the arts and animations and stuff. And that paired with the map that the player will always have access to, it helps them navigate. But since the basement is so big, it still gives a looming feeling of a childlike wonder being lost in like a place, you know?
Cool.
But we are able to just kind of use that to help navigate the player while also keeping the blooming feeling with the things that we added. And obviously, cool designs, you know, we occasionally add a custom poster or two for a mechanic or such, which, you know, it helps point out a relevant plot point while also being immersive and just, you know, generally looking cool. So 2D and 3D go hand in hand. I can't have models without 2D textures on them, so I can't have a cutout without an artist making the art for the character to go on the cutout.
Cool. All right. So obviously, you're actually the most ambitious Five Nights at Freddy's mod of all time. So kudos.
Thanks.
With all the expectations of the fans on restoring a huge part of the game, what is the main source of motivation when it comes to developing the remains?
The motivation is 100% the fans. I can't tell you how many times I've opened up that trailer and just scrolled through the comments. I'll be having a horrible mood. I won't have any motivation to work at all. And I'll scroll through and I'll see people being like, I will buy this $60 game just for your experience. I will pray every single day till I get this thing. I will literally re-download this game for this. I'm so excited for this to come out. This is one of my top things on my 2025 bucket list. That is insane. Like, there's so many people's happy days which are relying on this. If I'm able to push through this, if I'm able to bring out a good project that not only am I proud of, other people will be proud of, that's going to be amazing. I get to hear about all these stories about people who might be having a horrible day, and it's brightened because of me and my team.
Yeah, that's really sweet.
Yeah, so it is always amazing to push through. And to link in with another thing, we have a lot of problems which, you know, can really demotivate, which have really brought bummers down to the team and have almost like convinced me on quitting. But I always just check back on those comments and I can't think, like, what am I going to do if I don't deliver this project to these people who are so excited for this? If I'm not doing it for myself, I gotta at least do it for these guys. For the faithful people who believe in me.
Yeah, that's really sweet. What are some big accomplishments you've achieved in terms of like coding or models or maps?
Some certainly big accomplishments. I finished the entirety of a Basement 2 in about 2 weeks.
Oh wow.
Yeah. That was kind of like a world record for me. I'm unfortunately still refining the Basement 1s every single day, but it's mostly getting huge stuff done like that fast. Like, for instance, the Faz Watch, it's insane. We basically had to decompile the entirety of Gregory. So throughout the 3 years of development on Security Breach, where Seawolf were making Gregory, we recreated all of that by ourselves.
Wow.
And then we obviously added the Faz Watch back to its accurate form. So that was a monumental landmark. Like, yeah, that's considered like an insane feat of modding. Obviously, modding has big limitations. It's not the same as making a game. With a game, we could have just edited Gregory's blueprint. With this, we had to recreate it from scratch. We had to remake every single blueprint that went into it. And the fact that we were able to do that is a marvel. And I have nothing but the biggest amount of respect for the programmers that worked on that. Makes me glad that I just make maps.
Awesome. Alright, final question. I'm getting a little sappy. This has been fun. So, obviously, there's always going to be people who want to make big, ambitious projects. You know, they might start small and try to, like, make something impactful. Team-wise and also project-wise, is there anything that anyone should know when it comes to developing an important project, big or small?
That's a good question. So first off, you need to decide what you're going to contribute. You have to do something. You can't just sit there and tell people what to do. Early in our days, I was the only active member. Well, actually, basically no one was active. I wasn't even making maps because at the time I didn't have the editor unlocked. But whenever I got my editor unlocked, I started making all these maps. That showed the rest of the team that if they put their effort into this, it's not going to be wasted. Because everyone's been on some sort of project before that eventually died. Like, there'll be this cool kid thing, and like a cool fan game. Oh, it's going to be so cool, free roam and stuff. But it eventually falls out because nothing happens. So what you need is you need people that genuinely believe in this project, and you need to genuinely believe in this project. If you don't believe in it, nobody else does, and it will never get done. So that's the main thing. If you can get those first 5 steps, those first like 5% of completion, you've got the rest of the 95. That first 5% is the hardest. You need to get everyone motivated. You need to show that you're in this and let everyone know that if they put their work into this, it's not going to be wasted and it is going to be used to perfection. So, another thing is having a programmer. That's got to be one of the most important things. You can have all the models, all the animation, but nobody's going to be motivated until they see that stuff in-game and playable. That was another thing. Even though I was getting my maps, that got some people motivated, but until my good friend Star Adam came in, who was the main programmer, and he started putting these maps in games for us to see and record, everyone woke up. Everyone's like, all right, okay, I see we mean business. Let's get down to business. Ever since then, we've had a couple rep badges, like a couple, like exams, everyone's dead. Ever since then, it's been locked in. First off, you need everyone to believe in this. You, including yourself, and you need to make a dedication to it. And you need someone that could put it in game. They need to be able to see the results palpably. They need to be able to see it. They need to be able to experience their results so they know this stuff is real.
Yeah, it's just been a really fun night, and thank you for coming on board. I've been hyping this up for the past few days, and I feel like I've really learned some important things. I really hope that the people watching this learn some important things if they want to approach a similar direction. So thank you for taking the time to come on this interview with me. It really means a lot, and I bet it does to a lot of other people.
Absolutely. It means a lot for me too. It's kind of showing the impact that I have on this community. When it gets to the point where you're having people like interview you for like your FNAF fan game, that's kind of like an indication that you've made it. to me at least.
Yeah, thank you.
I was very happy to be invited.